So the term Gentelligence I came up with, it was probably 2017. I did a TEDx talk here at Miami about the topic, why I love millennials, and you should too. It's about the collaborative intelligence that comes from a generational diversity of thought. It's about the fact that growing up in different periods of time give you different kinds of expertise and perspective, and we know that that can be so valuable if we're willing to learn from it. There's this great saying in diversity, a fish doesn't know it's wet. And so when you look at cultural difference, and I very much think about generations as different kinds of culture, when you think about that, you don't know what you don't know. And the very first stage of that is denial. I realize that students are largely in that denial phase because they grow up with their own cohort, and until they get to work, they may not realize that their norms look any different than the norms of the people who are 20 years older than them. And a great example of this was, I was talking about a really common student behavior, particularly at that time, which was new for a lot of us, was students coming in to maybe negotiate an exam grade. Like, this is a confusing question, or you didn't say this was going to be on the test. A little pushing back, a little sort of negotiating. And so I was doing some scenarios and said, if you got this grade, you thought it was unfair, the test was not appropriate, what would you do? And a lot of them said, well, I would go in and discuss with the professor, varying degrees of what they would go negotiate. I would go argue, I would do these things. And I said, okay, well, I've experienced that. I agree, that's a behavior. Now, just as a question, how many of you do you think, your parents, when they were in your shoes, would have gone and done the same thing? If you were raised to get respect by putting your head down and being quiet, which a lot of our older generations were, yes, you need respect, you wanted respect, and this is how you were told you get it. Well, if you're younger, millennial or a Gen Z, you were raised, you go get that, you're worth it. Like, you put your hand up, you go ask for that, you tell them you're ready. Still comes from respect, we all have that, but very easily could be misconstrued as being entitled. So I think in terms of what I tell them, I say, think about, adjust your lens is one of the practices of Gentelligence. Like, what norms maybe are different for you than in prior generations, and how do you make sure you're not perceived as entitled, you're perceived as proactive, or you're not perceived in a way that you wouldn't agree represents your intent, and just being aware that, of course, you have lots of things to bring and share, but you also have a lot of things to learn.